identified inside of the state's official records about the 2022 and 2020 elections millions and millions of examples of what appear to be felony misconduct according to the United States Department of Justice's guidelines for prosecution of election offenses. What we've discovered is 29 million facially invalid registration records. These states had counted 2 million more votes than they have any record of voters having voted or participated. What we've done is file lawsuits in 9 states. We've filed federal lawsuits against the chief election official and the attorney general of each state, and additionally the attorney general of the United States of America, Merrick Garland, because our concern is that they are not operating elections in a way that upholds the fundamental right of American citizens to choose representatives.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rebecca Weber. You're watching Better for America. I am so thrilled to be back with you. There really is nothing that brings me more joy than to be with all of you, and that is why I'm thrilled to announce our next guest. On top of the mind for so many patriots, including AMAC members, is the upcoming presidential election, and there are so many valid concerns around irregularities. How concerned should we be that the 2024 election will be free and fair, especially when we really did watch massive, blatant violations of election law? We saw that happen in 2020 and 2022. Now joining me to discuss election integrity and enhancing transparency in 2024 is Marly Hornik. Marly is the Executive Director of New York Citizens Audit, which is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization dedicated to election integrity, and she is also the CEO of United Sovereign Americans. Marly is a published writer. She's appeared in Town Hall, Blaze Media, American Thinker, just to name a few. Marly, welcome to Better for America. I'm real happy to have you with me today.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. It's really a pleasure to be here and have the opportunity to share some of our work with your viewers.
It is so important, the work that you're doing, and I want to start with really how you began. You were here, I'm in New York. You had local New York beginnings. The New York Citizens Audit really revealed extensive irregularities in voter registration across the state. Tell us what led you to start this initiative and maybe how your personal background inspired you really to commit to investigating election integrity.
Actually, what inspired me to do all of this was my prayers and my feeling that if no one in America stepped up to do this work, it might not get done. And that, for me personally, and I know for all of the thousands of volunteers that we have now in New York and tens of thousands across America, that would be unacceptable. It would be unacceptable to not solve the problem of our election misconduct.
Yeah, and I've seen so much of the work that you've done. I've read it right here in New York. You've uncovered a lot, Marly. But now you are working on the national level through United Sovereign Americans. So I want to talk a little bit about that. You've expanded your efforts beyond New York. Tell us the most significant findings from your national investigations and how do they compare to what you've uncovered here in New York?
Sure. I mean, just to go back, the work that New York Citizens Audit did was monumental. And we identified inside of the state's official records about the 2022 and 2020 elections, millions and millions of examples of what appear to be felony misconduct according to the United States Department of Justice's guidelines for prosecution of election offenses. When we worked to try to bring these to officials all over New York State, we were basically stonewalled and ended up in an ongoing apparent criminal investigation by Letitia James herself, alleging that we have violated we've intimidated voters across New York State in some kind of equity with what the Ku Klux Klan was doing in 1871 in the United States and in the Deep South, just by trying to verify registration and voting issues. So what we realized, myself and many of the people in New York Citizens Audit, and also our dear friend and counselor at that time, advisor Harry Howery, was that we were going to have to make this a national issue because we were not going to be able to win in New York without that strategy. And so basically, we started looking at voter rolls across America, and we have officially audited 20 states' statewide voter registration list. This is a federal document that is considered the official record of registered voters and voter participation history for each one of these states. It is part of our critical national security infrastructure, and Congress has passed multiple laws demanding basically that this list be kept clean and accurate. And what we've discovered across these 20 states, representing 338 electoral college votes in the 2024 election, is 29 million facially invalid registration records. They cast 10 million votes in the 2022 midterm that were counted equally to eligible citizen voters' votes. These states had counted 2 million more votes than they have any record of voters having voted or participated. And overall, they had a 13% error rate in counting the vote, when Congress says the maximum amount of error for a federal election to be considered reliable is 0.0008%. The question is not, was there fraud? The question is, who has done this to our voting systems? Why are our election officials standing down? And how is it that they are coming out and certifying elections as if they represent only the will of eligible citizen voters from the United States of America? And certifying those results, certifying those officials to serve as representatives for people who honestly may not have elected them. And the state can't answer that question either. They actually don't know either because their records are a mess. And this is the only record that there is.
And that goes for all 20 states, you're saying. None of them can answer.
Correct. Their records show that they simply don't know who their voters are, but they give them ballots anyway, and they go ahead and certify. The elections don't reconcile. They don't meet accuracy requirements by Congress. But hey, you know, who's counting? Let's just go ahead and certify. And here we go. We lived with the results for 4 years, 2 years, maybe decades in some places. No one really knows. But it's time for the American people to have confidence and trust in our voting results. It's imperative for our country, whether people are Democrat, Republican, or any other political affiliation. If we can't all come back to honoring the peace treaty of our election systems, we will continue to fray as a nation. We won't be able to hold ourselves in unity.
That's right. The people I'm speaking with, you know, average everyday Americans, AMAC members. We recently had a Boot Camp for Boomers event. I introduced Lee Zeldin. He was one of our guest speakers. And the entire crowd erupted and said, you know, he won. They rigged the election against him. And I don't blame people for feeling this way, especially in the state of New York. I mean, people, have common sense, and they can sense something is really wrong. I was shocked to see that over your New York Citizens Audit provided 45 hours of public education, which is terrific. But you presented evidence to the New York State Police Special Investigations Unit in 2022 that seemed to reflect large-scale illegal manipulation of New York State voter databases. I mean, this is the kind of thing that, has any action been taken on that specifically, what was presented in June of 2022?
No, and it's really shocking because when we met with the New York State Police Special Investigations Unit, we met with them for over 3 hours, and we showed them, even it wasn't even a complete set of our findings at that time, but what we showed them shocked them to their core. And I spoke with that major the next morning because actually that meeting was the day before the Republican gubernatorial primary for the state of New York, speaking of Zeldin. And I called him the next morning and I said, sir, I'm getting reports already that the system we showed you yesterday is being used. I have strong suspicions it's being used. What can we do? And he said, I didn't sleep all night last night. I've never had that in all my years in law enforcement. I didn't sleep last night. And ultimately, they had to pass the investigation of our findings to the Foreign Intelligence Task Force of the FBI because this is critical infrastructure. So, evidence of a breach has to be considered possible foreign interference in our elections. And I'm sorry to say that the evidence we provided them is still present in the New York State voter registration list. And I can't say, regarding Lee's election, I can't say whether or not the 2022 midterm was rigged against him. What I can say is the New York State Board of Elections doesn't know either. There was a 12% error rate in counting the vote, and Kathy Hochul's margin of victory was 5.5%. And Attorney General Letitia James's margin of victory was 9%, calling both of their elections directly into question as a matter of law. It's not the question is not, are they governor and attorney general right now? The question is, were they granted that authority by the citizens of the state of New York? And the answer to that question, most disturbingly, is no one knows.
Yeah, I mean, every governor in every state, every election official in every state, everyone in Congress and the Senate, this country, we don't have a country if we don't have free and fair elections. And I'm afraid of what that will do, and how disenfranchised people will feel if this is not truly addressed. I mean, you think about it, Marly. It's you can't get on an airplane without proof of ID. You can't get through TSA without going through pre-screening, and millions of people do. So there is a way for us to ensure that everyone who's legally here in the United States of America with a valid Social Security number and valid ID are the only people who are voting in our elections. It's not that difficult. But of course, it seems that we've got people who don't want free and fair elections in America. Because suppose, common sense tells me the only reason why they don't want it is they don't think that they can win free and fairly. So again, we don't know. We really don't know, and we don't want to speculate, but what we do know is that it's happening. Why it's happening, we're not so sure. Given your work in really uncovering election discrepancies, do you think that technology could play a bigger role in helping to fix these irregularities, or should we go back to paper mail-in ballots? Because is there any evidence that these tools, technology tools, are manipulating the voter rolls?
That's a really interesting question. On the one hand, I would say that when technology is used in an instance like, say, JFK International Airport to manage a highly complex system with millions of customers and safety, security, and national economy on the line, it can be used well and effectively, right? You check in at JFK and whenever your plane is destined to land, ultimately, whatever your final destination is, you get there and your bag is there waiting for you. That's a technological marvel, actually. So, strictly speaking, there's no reason technology can't work. I think that the main risk of using technology for these systems is that it obscures the process for the American citizens. If we have to rely on experts to tell us, how the election systems operated and who won, we do risk our sovereignty. And the founders of this country felt that individual liberty, individual sovereignty was the highest goal of the United States of America, that the federal government was created in order to protect the right of every human who happens to be a United States citizen to live in direct relationship with their own creator. And the federal government was designed to protect that right. So we do take a serious risk when we allow that process to be obscured through excessive use of technology.
I want to encourage people. I mean, you're going to share a lot of resources with us, but people can learn more at auditnewyork.com. That's auditny.com. I do want to speak a little bit about what we're seeing in other states like Georgia and Arizona. They're tightening their election laws. But the left, what they're doing is they're attempting to frame these changes as voter suppression. So what they're saying, what the left is saying is, oh, watch out, the MAGA Republicans, what they want to do is suppress your vote. When in fact, so many people are just looking to protect the rights of legal American voters. How do you respond to that narrative? What do you believe that those reforms in Georgia, Arizona, for example, will do to ensure the integrity of the 2024 election? Will it be enough?
Right. I guess what I would say is the actions of United Sovereign Americans show that we don't think they're doing enough. Although I applaud the Georgia State Elections Board and especially Dr. Jan Johnston, who is an American hero, and those working with her, and with the advisement also of some part of United Sovereign Americans, I would add. But what we've done is file lawsuits in 9 states. We've filed federal lawsuits against the chief election official and the attorney general of each state. And additionally, the attorney general of the United States of America, Merrick Garland, is a defendant in each one of these 9 lawsuits. We've filed in Maryland, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Florida, Texas, Michigan, North Carolina, Colorado, and Georgia. So blue states, red states, purple states, I don't even know, polka dot states. We have filed in all kinds of states all across the United States of America because our concern is that they are not operating elections in a way that upholds the fundamental right of American citizens to choose representatives. And that's what we assert in our lawsuits. And we simply ask in these lawsuits for the courts to order these states to obey the law. And one of the things you mentioned before is an interesting example of this. You mentioned voter ID. So I agree. It would be so simple for states to simply adopt an identification, standard by which people would be allowed to vote. However, if they do not adopt that standard, that does not absolve them of the responsibility under the Constitution to verify every single person they give a ballot to before they give them that ballot. Because if they give a ballot to someone who is not qualified to vote, either because they're not eligible, they're not a citizen, or for whatever reason, they are committing election fraud. That is dilution of the vote. And the Supreme Court has ruled many times in our history that dilution of the vote and denial of the vote are equal harms that the state must protect against. So that's what we're claiming in our lawsuits, is that the state simply doesn't know who their voters are. They give ballots regardless. They don't reconcile their elections, so the process is not legitimate. And in the end of the day, they completely ignore Congress's standard of reliability, and they certify anyway. It puts them in the position, Rebecca, of acting like umpires over the United States of America and calling
Right.
balls and strikes for the American people. And that's not how our system operates. And again, it's a tragedy for our country, the kind of rancor that's taking place right now across political battle lines. And the United Sovereign Americans approach, in direct answer to your question, does this undermine the election integrity? Does it secure election integrity? It's designed to help everyone take a deep breath and say, well, my team lost this time, or my candidate lost this time, but I'm going to get in there because I know that my efforts are going to matter. I'm going to get in there and work harder for the next round. I'm going to look at, what were our platforms? Why weren't they popular enough to win? And I'm going to go in and act like a good American and collaborate with my fellow citizens to make this country great.
Yeah. With these lawsuits that you filed in these 9 states, I imagine that's going to take some time before we see what the, certainly nothing will happen between now and Election Day. Is that fair to say?
It's a reasonable assumption. We do plan to file more lawsuits, hopefully before the election, but certainly we plan to file lawsuits during the election. And one of the things that these actions have secured is ironclad standing during the election for citizens to challenge election returns as a matter of law. It's not about saying, this candidate won or this candidate lost. It's about going in and saying this process did not follow the law. And so what's being claimed as an outcome is illegitimate. It has to be redone. And there is significant precedent in the United States of America when citizens argue that their civil rights could be denied or abridged, and they bring that into the courts before the abridgment takes place, before the harm. They're seen historically as having ironclad standing to make challenges, which no one had in 2020. So one of the things United Sovereign Americans has done in puzzling through, how do we actually fix this? How do we take this down to the mat before another sham election is certified? This is a part of that strategy. And we do plan to file more lawsuits, and we plan to file them in as many of the states as we need to secure the election for the American people.
The work you're doing with United Sovereign Americans is just incredible. As we approach the 2024 presidential election, I know so many Americans, including our great listeners, they're increasingly concerned about the validity of their vote. What message do you want to leave our over 2 million AMAC members? Any words of encouragement?
I have a couple things. First of all, the last thing you want to do is don't vote. I mean, go and vote and vote and vote and vote. Just make sure that you're there, your friends are there, your family's there. Make sure everybody your voice deserves to be heard in the United States of America. And we are fighting to make sure that happens. So don't quit now. Hold the line. The other thing is, if you have a problem voting, if you experience any kind of anomaly or irregularity yourself in the counting or casting of your ballot, please go to uniteforfreedom.com and follow our simple process to submit an official election misconduct report to your state officials. So you're going to send a copy of your experience not only to United Sovereign Americans to use as evidence, but you're going to submit it through our simple, clear, easy to follow process to the investigators who are responsible for doing something about it before they certify. This is going to give us evidence, real-time evidence, that the states have declined once again to follow the law as we asserted they would. It's going to help us prevent certification of false returns. So please make sure you write down the website, uniteforfreedom.com, unite4freedom.com. Have that at the ready. If you go to the polls and have a problem, or anyone you know has a problem, fill out that election misconduct report form, and that's going to help us secure the election. We have pre-positioned litigation to use your reports to save our country.
Marly, thank you. That is such a great message. So important. We'll make sure to get that out in many, many ways so that all AMAC members are aware. Marly, thank you so much. You are a true champion of individual liberty, and I am so grateful for the work that you continue to do. God bless you, and thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Rebecca.
The Association of Mature American Citizens is the conservative voice for Americans 50 and older. AMAC is fighting for the values that you hold dear. Join today. Together, we can write the course of America.